Welcome to Wisdom and Wealth, friends. In this episode, we'll be diving into Buddhist wisdom to help cultivate a fearless life, especially for those of us navigating the complexities of midlife and beyond. We all know that as we get older, certain fears can loom larger, but with the right understanding, we can find a sense of peace and freedom. Now, before we get started, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. It really helps us reach a wider audience and bring this valuable content to more people like you. Let's begin with Chapter 1, What Are We Really Afraid Of? When we talk about fear, our minds often jump to immediate dangers, a car accident, a sudden illness, the loss of a loved one. But the fear that truly weighs us down, that insidious anxiety that gnaws at our peace of mind, rarely stems from such tangible threats. It's something more subtle, more deeply buried, a persistent shadow that follows us even when we're safe and secure. This isn't the kind of fear you can easily name or point to. It manifests as a vague sense of unease, a constant undercurrent of anxiety, and a nagging feeling that everything could crumble at any moment. Now, from a Buddhist perspective, this pervasive fear doesn't originate from external circumstances. It's not the world that's making us afraid. It's something within ourselves, something we're not seeing clearly. The Buddha taught that the root of all fear lies in ignorance, ignorance of the true nature of reality. We fail to grasp the fundamental truths of impermanence, suffering, and, most importantly, non-self. We cling to the illusion of a permanent me at the center of our experience. It's the me that owns things, the me that seeks validation, the me that is terrified of losing everything it holds dear. Fear, in this context, thrives on our attempts to protect this fragile I. We dread aging because we mistakenly believe that I am this aging body. We're afraid of being forgotten because we identify our I with our reputation and achievements. We recoil from silence because we define I by the incessant chatter of our thoughts. So, when change inevitably arrives, and it always does, this constructed I feels threatened, vulnerable, and exposed. And that's precisely where suffering begins. As the Dhammapada wisely states, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. Remember, we will be discussing fear a few times during this video, so if you find these topics helpful and resonate with you, please like or subscribe to the Wisdom and Wealth Buddhist Doctrine channel. Thank you. Clinging to anything that is inherently subject to change, including our own perceived selves, is a guaranteed recipe for fear and disappointment. What is constantly shifting and evolving cannot be grasped and held onto forever. Psychology might frame fear as a natural response to uncertainty, but Buddhism digs deeper. It asks, why do we crave certainty in the first place? The answer lies in the self's insatiable desire for safety and security. But life, in its very essence, doesn't offer such guarantees. Therefore, fear emerges not because life itself is inherently dangerous, but because our ingrained notion of me simply cannot accept life as it truly is, a continuous flow of experiences, characterized by uncertainty, change, and a fundamental lack of ownership. If we turn our attention inward and observe our minds with a discerning eye, we'll begin to notice something peculiar. The mind is constantly spinning a narrative about who we are. This story is woven from memories, beliefs, desires, roles, and a whole host of other subjective elements. And whenever this story is challenged, whenever something threatens our carefully constructed self-image, fear surges to the surface with remarkable speed. It's the visceral feeling that the carefully crafted narrative of me is about to unravel. Even the existential philosopher Kierkegaard grappled with this phenomenon. He famously spoke of the dizziness of freedom, a profound anxiety that arises when we confront the realization that there is no solid, fixed ground beneath our feet. It's about facing a raw reality devoid of a stable, enduring I to cling to for comfort and security. Unbeknownst to us, many of us spend our entire lives running, not from literal threats like lions or raging fires, but from this persistent, underlying fear that lurks within. We try to outrun it by keeping ourselves perpetually busy, by mindlessly scrolling through social media feeds, by relentlessly chasing after external measures of success and fleeting moments of comfort. However, the Buddha recognized that avoidance only serves to amplify the power of fear. The more desperately we try to escape it, the more tightly we cling to the illusion of a false self, and the more profound our suffering becomes. Instead, the Buddha invites us to pause, to turn inward, and to observe with gentle curiosity. He wisely advised, "Whatever is not yours, let it go." Letting go will bring you happiness and peace. Fear, in this light, is not an enemy to be vanquished, but a valuable signal. It acts as a pointer, indicating what we are clinging to, what we are claiming as mine. It serves as a teacher, illuminating the areas where we are holding on too tightly. So, the next time fear arises, try asking yourself these insightful questions. What is this fear trying to protect? What idea of me is it desperately trying to defend? And then, venture deeper. Is this I truly solid and unchanging? Or is it merely a transient collection of thoughts, feelings, and memories? This is not some abstract philosophical concept to be debated in academic circles. It's a tangible truth that we can discover for ourselves, through direct, personal experience. With the practice of mindfulness, we can learn to observe the arising of fear with detachment and curiosity. We can notice the physical sensations, how the body tenses, how the breath becomes shallow, how thoughts begin to race. And if we resist the urge to push it away, if we simply observe with non-judgmental awareness, something profound begins to shift within us. Fear starts to lose its grip. We realize that it is not a fixed, immutable entity, but a dynamic process, akin to a wave that crests and then inevitably recedes. And we come to understand that we don't need to fight it or flee from it. We simply need to understand it. This understanding doesn't dawn on us in a sudden flash of insight. It unfolds gradually, through patient attention, honest self-reflection, and consistent practice. As we cultivate this awareness, we become less afraid of fear itself. We begin to see it not as a monster lurking in the shadows, but as a doorway, one that can lead us to profound self-discovery and a life that is more open, more compassionate, and more genuinely free. The key question is whether we choose to use fear as a mirror, reflecting our inner landscape with clarity, or as a wall, shielding us from the very truths that could set us free. The Buddha never promised a life devoid of fear. But he demonstrated that by understanding the root causes of fear, we can begin to live without being controlled by it. And in that quiet space, not of escapism, but of deep, unwavering seeing, a different kind of peace begins to take root and flourish. It is the peace that comes from truly being present with life, just as it is. Chapter 2, I'm Not Afraid of Death. A myth. There's a story I often think about, a conversation I had with a friend. He once declared to me, with a hint of bravado, "I'm not afraid of death. It's a natural part of life. Everyone dies." But later that same day, as he spoke about the inevitable realities of aging and the potential for being forgotten, his voice trembled ever so slightly. In that subtle tremor, I understood something profound. He wasn't intentionally lying, but he wasn't being entirely honest with himself either. Quite often, we confidently proclaim that we don't fear death, but what we truly mean is that we're unwilling to acknowledge the fear that lies dormant beneath the surface, disguised under a multitude of other names. It's easy to utter the words, "I'm not afraid." They sound strong, resilient, and even admirable. But the fear of death rarely presents itself so directly. Instead, it slips in quietly, wearing a variety of disguises. We feel it when we're gripped by panic at the thought of losing our job. When we're consumed by worry about being alone and unloved. When we're driven by an insatiable need to prove our worth. These are the subtle ways in which the fear of death manifests itself in our daily lives. From a Buddhist perspective, this fear isn't solely about the cessation of bodily functions. It's about something far deeper, the fear that the carefully constructed person we believe ourselves to be will vanish into oblivion. We've spent years, perhaps decades, building this intricate idea of me, a collection of stories, achievements, roles, and self-perceptions. And we desperately want this me to endure, to continue existing in some form. That's the underlying fear that lurks beneath the surface of the seemingly confident statement, "I'm not afraid." If you are liking the current discussion on fear in this video, please click the like or subscribe button so you can keep receiving the Wisdom and Wealth Buddhist Doctrine channel. The Buddha taught that what we commonly refer to as I is not a fixed, permanent entity. It's more like a flowing river, a continuous process of change. Thoughts, feelings, habits, sensations, all are in a constant state of flux. The mind, however, resists accepting this fundamental truth. It clings fiercely to the illusion of a stable, unchanging self, desperately seeking a sense of control and predictability. This clinging, this grasping for permanence in a world of impermanence, is the very root of our suffering. And fear is one of its inevitable offspring, the fear that who we think we are might not last. What people truly dread is often not merely the biological end of life, but the disappearance of the person we think we are, our cherished memories, our carefully cultivated roles, and the very sense of a separate, individual I. The Buddha spoke eloquently of non-self, or anatta. What we habitually call self is not a solid, enduring substance. It's more akin to a flickering flame, constantly changing in response to ever-shifting conditions. When those conditions cease to exist, the flame goes out. It simply ends. This concept can sound unsettling, even frightening, at first. But it is, in reality, the key to unlocking profound inner peace. If there is no fixed I, then what, exactly, is there to lose? The ancient Taoist sage Chuang Tzu once shared a poignant story that illustrates this principle beautifully. When his wife passed away, he didn't weep or wail. Instead, he sat serenely and drummed on a bowl. People were shocked by his apparent lack of grief. He explained, before she was born, she didn't exist. Now she has returned to the natural order. Life and death are simply two facets of the same underlying reality. He possessed a deep understanding that transcended the illusion of separation. True Buddhist fearlessness, therefore, is not about cultivating a tough, stoic facade. True fearlessness, known as ubhya, arises as a natural consequence of profound understanding. The Buddha once likened a liberated individual to a flame that has been extinguished. Just as we cannot definitively say where the flame has gone, we cannot adequately describe what happens to one who has awakened after death. They are liberated from all limitations, freed from the constraints of the ego. This is a state of peace that transcends all conceptual frameworks. So, what is genuine courage, then? It's the capacity for unwavering honesty. It's the willingness to acknowledge, yes, I am afraid sometimes. But I am committed to understanding that fear. I want to sit with it, learn from it, and allow it to guide me. Courage is the ability to remain still in the presence of fear, to resist the urge to run away. A student once asked a Zen master, "What is the most essential practice?" The master replied simply, "To die before you die." He wasn't referring to physical death. He was pointing to the death of the false self, the ego-driven construct that causes us so much suffering. Only then can we truly live fully, authentically, and without fear. When someone declares, "I don't fear death," it's worth asking, is that voice calm, genuine, and grounded in understanding, or is it masking something, covering up deeper anxieties? Is there still a fear of losing status, of being forgotten, of becoming irrelevant? These are profound questions that invite us to cultivate radical honesty with ourselves. You can quietly ask yourself these probing questions. When I say I'm not afraid, what part of me is speaking? Is it the ego trying to maintain control? If everything I identify with, my job, my name, my possessions, suddenly disappeared, what would be left? Who would I be? These are invaluable companions on the journey of self-discovery. They gently guide you to look more deeply, not to judge yourself harshly, but to understand with compassion. Because when you understand, fear loses its power. Its grip loosens. The stories we tell ourselves become less rigid, more fluid. The breath becomes easier, the body more relaxed. In that spaciousness, something truly beautiful begins to unfold, not the complete and permanent eradication of fear, but the beginning of truth, the unveiling of our authentic selves. Chapter 3: What dies? What stays? When someone dies, it feels like an ending, a final chapter in the story of their life. But when we pause and examine this experience more closely, we might be prompted to ask, what actually dies? From the Buddhist perspective, death is not about the disappearance of a soul, because there never was a fixed, permanent soul to begin with. If you're new to the Buddhist faith, please like or subscribe to the Wisdom and Wealth Buddhist Doctrine channel. We will discuss the 5 aggregates next. This concept may seem counterintuitive if you've grown up believing in the existence of an unchanging self. The Buddha, however, pointed to a fundamentally different understanding of reality. What we commonly refer to as a person is not a single, unified entity. It's a temporary composite, a dynamic mix of 5 elements, known as the 5 aggregates: body, rupa, feelings, vedana, perceptions, sana, mental formations, sankhara, and consciousness, vijnana. These aggregates arise due to a complex interplay of causes and conditions. They come together for a period of time, like a wave rising on the ocean, and then they inevitably break apart. So, when someone dies, what ceases to exist is the particular combination of these 5 elements. There's no separate thing, no soul or spirit, that departs. But that doesn't mean that nothing at all remains. You can think of it like lighting one candle with the flame from another. The second flame is not identical to the first, but there is a clear sense of continuity, a transmission of energy. This principle is known as conditioned arising, or pratisha samutpada. Everything comes into being through a web of interconnected causes and conditions, and when those conditions change, the thing itself changes or ceases to exist. There is no unchanging core, no independent essence. The stream of life continues to flow, influenced by karma, our actions, intentions, and the consequences that arise from them. It's more like a ripple effect, where one moment passes on its energy to the next, creating a continuous flow. There is movement, but no fixed owner. The self that we fear losing was never a solid, immutable entity. It was always a process, a dynamic interplay of experiences and perceptions. Always shaped by what we encountered, what we clung to, and what we let go of. So, when death arrives, it doesn't destroy a permanent being. It simply dissolves a temporary construction. Think about your own physical body. Every cell is constantly being replaced, every molecule is in a state of flux. Nothing in you stays exactly the same for very long. So, why do we cling so fiercely to the idea that there is a me that can truly die? This is where the profound Buddhist concept of emptiness, or sunyata, comes into play. Emptiness doesn't mean that things don't exist at all. It means that things don't exist in the way we usually believe they do. They don't exist independently, as isolated entities. They exist in dependence, in relationship, on causes, conditions, and their connections to everything else in the universe. We are all threads in a vast, interconnected web. When one thread is severed, the web still continues to move, to vibrate with energy. And our influence, our relationships, our acts of kindness, they continue to resonate in some form, even after our physical body has ceased to function. Think about people you've loved who are no longer alive. If you sit quietly and allow yourself to feel, are they truly gone? Or do they continue to exist in how you speak, how you love, how you navigate the world? The physical form may be absent, but something meaningful remains. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wisely observed that death is simply a natural function of life, like a leaf falling from a tree. Not a tragedy, but a natural occurrence. Buddhism echoes this sentiment, but then delves even deeper. It invites us to look directly at what we think is dying, and to recognize that much of our fear is rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of reality. If we cling to the belief that we are a solid, independent self, death feels like a devastating attack, a violent disruption of our very being. However, if we can begin to perceive ourselves as part of a flowing, changing, interconnected reality, the fear begins to soften. We no longer feel the need to cling so desperately to a rigid story of me, a story that was never stable to begin with. This shift in perspective comes through sustained observation, through honest self-reflection, and through paying close attention to how things actually work. So, here is something to ponder in quiet contemplation. When you think about your death, what part of you do you imagine will disappear? Is it your name? Your memories? Your accomplishments? Now, ask yourself, were those things ever truly unchanging? If everything you identify with is part of a continuous flow of change, then perhaps death is not the absolute end of you. Perhaps it's simply the natural pause in a particular pattern, the fading of a song, the receding of a wave. When we begin to see this truth, the fear of death starts to lose its power. Not because we've adopted a new belief system, but because we've loosened our grip on an old illusion. In that letting go, something beautiful opens up, a sense of quiet freedom, a sense of being part of something larger than ourselves, a sense that even as one form ends, life, in its myriad expressions, continues. If you enjoy listening to the Wisdom and Wealth Buddhist Doctrine channel, then please like or subscribe. Chapter 4, Death as a Teacher. I once had the privilege of sitting with an old monk. His face was as serene as a still lake, reflecting a lifetime of wisdom and contemplation. Unexpectedly, he turned to me and said, "Most people spend their lives pretending that death will never come." Then he smiled gently, "But if you truly know that you're going to die, you live differently." His words resonated deeply within me, and they have stayed with me ever since. This chapter explores that quiet wisdom, how death, often seen as the ultimate enemy, can actually be one of our greatest teachers. In the Buddha's time, monks and nuns practiced a daily reflection on death. This practice, known as maranasati, mindfulness of death, is not intended to induce morbid thoughts or depression. It's designed to awaken us to the preciousness and fragility of life, and to help us prioritize what truly matters. Many of us live as though we have an endless supply of time. We postpone pursuing our passions, we neglect our relationships, and we put off addressing the things that truly resonate with our hearts. But when we remember death, when we acknowledge it as an inevitable fact of life, we begin to see with greater clarity what is truly valuable. The Buddha taught that mindfulness of death, when developed, leads to the deathless. He was pointing to nibbana, or liberation, the kind of freedom that arises when you cease clinging to the illusion of permanence. Even the renowned psychiatrist Viktor Frankl observed something similar in his work with individuals facing terminal illnesses. He noted that an awareness of death can imbue life with profound meaning. When we forget that our time is limited, we tend to drift aimlessly, living without a clear sense of direction or purpose. When we remember, we are compelled to live with greater intention, authenticity, and passion. Yet, despite the potential benefits, so many of us actively avoid thinking about death. We distract ourselves with endless activity, we mindlessly scroll through social media, and even when we're physically and emotionally exhausted, we keep pushing ourselves to avoid sitting still. Because when we stop, the fear creeps in, the fear of the unknown, the fear of loss, the fear of our own mortality. The more we run from death, the more it controls us. We become obsessed with protecting everything, our image, our possessions, our status, because deep down, we fear losing them. This fear can constrict our lives, limiting our experiences and preventing us from fully embracing the present moment. We're not really living, we're simply managing our fear. The Buddha, however, offered an alternative path. He taught the practice of letting go, visagga. This practice involves cultivating a deep understanding that everything is impermanent, and therefore, we don't need to cling so desperately. We don't need to hold on so tightly to our possessions, our identities, or our expectations. When we let go, we paradoxically become more alive, more present, and more receptive to the beauty and wonder of life. Think of a breathtaking sunset. If you try to capture it with your camera, you're likely to miss the true essence of the experience. If you simply allow yourself to see it, without trying to control it, possess it, or freeze it in time, it becomes a moment of pure, unadulterated beauty. That's what it's like to live with an awareness of death. You're simply present, fully engaged in the unfolding of each moment. And in that presence, there is a profound sense of peace. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh wisely said, "The cloud does not die. It transforms into rain." Nothing is ever truly lost, it simply changes form. Death ceases to be something that steals from us and becomes a gentle reminder. Every moment is precious, every small act of kindness is a gift, and every breath is an opportunity. Accepting death opens the heart, fostering compassion, gratitude, and a deep appreciation for the interconnectedness of all things. When you know you don't have forever, you listen more attentively, you forgive more readily, and you say, "Thank you," with genuine sincerity. So, here's something to quietly ask yourself: if today were my last day, what would I still be holding on to that no longer matters? Who would I reach out to? What pretenses would I drop? In Buddhist practice, death is not the ultimate end, and life is not merely a race toward that end. They are both integral parts of the same flowing river, inextricably linked and interdependent. When we open ourselves to this profound truth, we can live with greater peace, greater joy, and greater courage, motivated not by fear, but by love and compassion. The old monk finished his tea, his eyes twinkling with wisdom. When you become friends with death, he said softly, you stop wasting time. And that is when you really begin to live. That is the heart of it. Seeing clearly, so that we can live fully, love wisely, and walk gently in this short, shining life. Chapter 5, No Death, No Fear, the Ultimate Freedom. There is a profound kind of silence that arises from deep within, when the mind quiets its incessant chatter and ceases its relentless pursuit of distractions. It's a silence free from fear, because the self that habitually fears is no longer present in the same way. It is full of understanding. In the Buddhist tradition, that silence is considered a taste of nibbana, also known as nirvana. If you are new to the Buddhist faith, please like or subscribe to the Wisdom and Wealth Buddhist Doctrine channel. Nibbana, or liberation, literally means the blowing out, like a flame that has consumed all of its fuel. But what, precisely, is extinguished? Not the person, but the flames of craving, hatred, and ignorance, the internal fires that drive us to cling, to fear, and to perpetuate our own suffering. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with unnecessary burdens. One day, you suddenly realize that this weight isn't actually you. It's a collection of attachments, anxieties, and self-imposed limitations. So, you gratefully put it down. That's the essence of nibbana, a profound sense of relief and liberation. When the Buddha realized this profound peace, he spoke of a state that is unborn, undying, the freedom that arises when the mind no longer clings to the illusion of a separate self. In that spaciousness, fear simply cannot find a foothold. The fear of death is fundamentally rooted in the belief in a self that can die. But when we examine this notion closely, we discover that this self has never been solid or permanent. It's like a flickering flame, real and visible, yet impossible to grasp. It changes with each breath, each sensation, each passing thought. Everything is in constant motion, a ceaseless dance of arising and passing away. Yet, we stubbornly persist in trying to hold it still, desperately hoping that we won't lose the things and people we love. That grasping, that clinging, is the very essence of fear. The Buddha taught that, there is no fear for one who has gone beyond all views. This means that the heart has stopped arguing with reality, has ceased its futile attempts to control the uncontrollable. Birth and death are simply movements within a vast, open process, a grand unfolding that is not personal, not confined to the narrow boundaries of the ego. There is no me who is born, and no me who ultimately dies. The wave rises and falls, but the ocean remains, vast and undisturbed. This freedom is not merely an abstract concept to be debated in philosophical circles. It's something that can be touched, tasted, and experienced, little by little, in our daily lives. Each time we consciously let go of an obsessive thought, each time we pause before reacting impulsively, each time we choose compassion over judgment, we catch a glimpse of nibbana. We are not waiting to become free after death. Freedom begins the moment we cease building the prison of I and mine. The habitual patterns of self-clinging are deeply ingrained, but they are not immutable. Peace can be learned, cultivated, and nurtured. Through the practice of mindfulness, we begin to see reality with greater clarity. Through meditation, we create space for our minds to settle and find stillness. Through compassion, we soften the rigid boundaries of the self. Through wisdom, we relinquish the futile search for security in things that can never be truly secured. People often ask, if there is no self, who gets enlightened? The Buddha responded to such questions with silence, because the very question stems from the illusion that needs to be relinquished. When there is no longer anyone to protect, no one to defend, what remains is a profound and unshakable peace. Not the peace of hiding, but the peace of knowing that we are not merely this limited bundle of clinging, this collection of thoughts and emotions. We are not irrevocably trapped in this body or confined by this name. At the moment of his full awakening, the Buddha described his mind as unshaken, like a rock, freed from all attachments. No more fear, no more confusion, just a deep and abiding stillness, and a love that knows no boundaries. We live in a world that is in a constant state of flux. Everything is changing, evolving, and transforming. But the teachings remind us that within the heart of all this movement, there is a freedom that does not move, a peace that remains untouched by the storms of life. That is the essence of no death, no fear. It is a lived understanding, a gradual unfolding of wisdom and compassion that grows with each step we take on the path. So, we keep walking, we keep breathing, we keep seeing clearly, and we keep letting go. And over time, we stop fearing the wave, because we remember that we were never separate from the ocean.